Let's jump straight into it today. So today, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about social security, self-managed super funds and social security. Services Australia, Centrelink obviously goes by many names, but primarily what we're talking about is how self-managed superannuation funds can contemplate qualifying for, or members of self-managed super funds can contemplate qualifying for the age pension or for the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. So look, I'm going to take a very sort of broad overview of the social security requirements and delve into a little bit of the strategic side of things as well as we go. So it's really, I guess, the purpose for me of wanting to present today is that I find that there are a lot of good things coming out of the contribution changes that have occurred over the last probably 12 to 18 months, but we can even go back further. But in addition to that, we've also had a number of announcements made by the new government in regards to, I guess, providing further benefits or providing further incentives for age pension recipients to potentially downsize. We've seen some freezing of deeming and other things as well as a couple of other announcements that have come into place. And for me, that makes, I guess, a great opportunity, or provides a great opportunity for us to start to talk about social security and the age pension from the view of self-managed superannuation funds, because albeit that we often talk about self-managed super funds as being the realm of the high net wealth individuals, we've got to also appreciate that there are a lot of members in self-managed super funds that have those balances around that $400,000 or $500,000 and even lower as they start to work their way through retirement. And at what point do they become eligible to apply for the age pension, or indeed to apply for Commonwealth Seniors Health Card and get those pharmaceutical benefits and that associated with it? So for me, it's one of those areas where it's good to have a look at all of the things as they apply, and then one, we can apply it in our own life. And two, we can see how we can apply it with our clients as well. So I'm going to touch on the changes that have been proposed, and by proposed, I mean they've actually made their way a fair way through Parliament at the moment. So with the budget impending, we've reached the end of the sitting period prior to the budget. So whether or not these changes actually come into place pre-budget, it's unlikely, but that's not to suggest that we won't see them implemented shortly, given that some of the changes have actually gone through some sort of relatively strong rewrites just to tidy up what was originally proposed. So we'll go through those proposals, the impact these changes have on various contribution and I guess then subsequently pension strategies. So, we've got clients that have existing pensions in place. What are we looking at with regards to how they draw down on those income streams, what those income streams might look like in the future? Do they have the capacity to make more contributions to their superannuation fund? And of course, then by virtue of all of that, what blind spots these changes may introduce. And that's almost become a bit of a common theme across a number of my presentations of recent times, is with all these sort of good news announcements, for want of a better term, in the SMSF and superannuation space, what potential blind spots are there that we need to be mindful of. So following on from this webinar, we'll hopefully everyone here will have a good appreciation or an extended appreciation of the qualification rules from an age pension point of view, how the asset and income test work with reference to accessing various benefits. So obviously in this instance, the age pension and then the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. The impact of various contribution strategies in a post 1 July 22 expanded contribution universe. And you've all heard me talking a lot about contributions over the past few months, and some of those contributions and the various strategies linked to them. How will they affect things, or how will those strategies affect what we do in the social security scheme of things? So all of those become fairly relevant and fairly important from our client base point of view. And then the final bit that I hope you get out of today is the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card eligibility and the grandfathering rules. So there's so much talk about over the recent months: death benefit nominations, reversionary pensions, and we always talk about these sorts of things in isolation. But today, I guess in many senses, I'll be tying together some of the issues associated with reversionary pensions versus death benefit income streams versus grandfathered pensions versus using downsizer contribution or recontribution strategies, and the various impacts that all of these things that we like to isolate and talk about in the singular, how they actually are co-joined and form part of the much broader strategy piece that we need to be able to discuss with our clients as they approach age pension age. So there's a lot for us to get through today in the sense of explanation and understanding of how the Social Security rules work. And then broadly at the end, as I said, what I want to touch on is more around the strategy piece. And without getting too deep into individual circumstances, really sort of highlighting the broad brush issues that we need to be mindful of in that space. So firstly, let's start off with the proposed legislative changes, and there are others. There are a couple of other social services, so Social Security legislative changes that have also been proposed around things like the pension bonus scheme or the work bonus scheme. So if people are continuing to work, that actually enhances the capacity for them to draw down some income from that employment and not impact their age pension entitlements. I haven't really incorporated every piece of Social Security law. I've just incorporated the ones that I see as being the key measures. But the first one, which is not a Social Security one, is the Treasury Laws Amendment 2022 Measures Number 2 Bill, which is effectively, let's call it the week before election promise legislation, which is to decrease the eligibility for downsizer contributions from age 60 to 55. So of course, we had that scurry of announcements prior to the federal election, where the government at the time made an announcement of reducing the downsizer contribution to 55, and then the opposition at the time matched it. Now, of course, this is on top of the fact that the downsizer the downsizer age was already reducing from the 1st of July this year from age 65 down to 60. So, by extension of this pre-election promise, we're now going to see that age changing to 55. And of course, what that does strategically is it changes really the dynamic of a lot of things, given particularly that preservation age is one of the key issues associated with a lot of the contribution rules and then pension strategies that we do. But by decreasing eligibility to downsizer prior to age or down to 55, that's going to certainly I guess impact whether or not people are wanting to use it. So I can see the benefit of it, but whether people start to use it at 55 is going to be another issue. So a question there from Wayne, which is in relation to the second question. So what I'll do is I'll just highlight the issue, and then I'll cover off on Wayne's question there. So then we've got the Social Services and Other Legislation Amendment, Incentivizing Pensioners to Downsize Bill. They don't make the title of bills any easier these days. And the purpose of this bill is to extend the asset test exemption of proceeds from the sale of a house from 12 months to 24 months. So this is a really interesting one. And the question that Wayne has posed is, will the 24-month asset test exemption be backdated, i.e. to apply to sales legislation effective date? Now, that's a really good question, Wayne, and it's actually a question that is dear to my heart, and I'm trying to find the definitive answer to that. So, it's one that I actually think that I would like to be put, or that I hope to put in the when I send the slides out, because we sold our family home and the proceeds came through in January of 2022, and my mother is on the age pension, and so currently the proceeds of the family home that she sold are exempt from the asset test for 12 months, which only takes us through to January next year. Now, that's ultimately the effective date of the legislation, based on the way that the legislation is currently written, is that it's effective from that point in time. But does it backdate to say if you're currently in that exemption period, then you'll get that automatic extension to 24 months? That devil's in the detail, and I haven't been able to specifically find that. There's been some amendments suggested with some of these pieces of legislation, and so I'm trying to trawl through it all, because I find that to be a really critical point. because in my own mum's situation there, it means that in literally 4 months' time, the amount that she's got sitting in that bank, which she hasn't yet put towards the purchase of a new home, will be counted and will ultimately result in her losing the age pension. So it's pretty significant for all those in existing pensions who have sold a house in recent times. It's pretty significant to know whether or not that 24-month extension is going to be backdated. And so, Wayne, that's one that I am absolutely looking into at the moment. But yeah, what it does is it gives us this strategic opportunity. And now, for me, if we tie that in with the downsizer, and I'm going to come back and talk about that strategically a little bit later in the session, the whole idea of, do we put the money from the proceeds of a sale of a house into superannuation, or do we maintain it outside of superannuation under this 2-year exemption from the asset test and restricted rules on the deeming side of things from the income test? And then potentially with the removal of the work test, do we then look to say, okay, well, we're not eligible for the downsizer because we're outside our 90-day period, but in 2 years' time, is our total super balance lower than $1.7 million? We've got to assume that if we're talking about people that are qualifying for the age pension, that they are going to be less than that 1.7. So do they have the capacity to then make that contribution to super at a later point as a non-concessional versus a downsizer contribution? And I think this is where, strategically, these sorts of changes become quite relevant. And then the other side of this piece of legislation is that the proceeds from an income test purposes are going to be measured against the lower deeming rate. So they're going to be measured against the 0.25% rate. So again, right now we're sitting in a 12-month exemption, and let's say, for argument's sake, that my mum put $500,000 roughly in the bank as a proceeds from the sale of her house. Well, the first $50,000 of that was assessed at 0.25%, and everything above that was assessed at 2.25%. So it's going to make a significant impact also on the income test for those that are looking to sell down their house. And I think strategically, this change really ties in with the downsizer and makes us want to think through the process of whether downsizer is worthwhile from a point of view of our age pension clients. So yeah, key piece of legislation sitting currently, I think, before the Senate. So it's gone through, I think, its first and second, maybe even its third reading, and hopefully we get something on that soon. And then the other piece is this social services and other legislation lifting the income limit for Commonwealth Seniors Health Card Bill. Now, the purpose of this, and I've got the limits throughout the presentation, but it's to increase for those who don't qualify under the asset test, so they fail to get the age pension because their assets are too high, then their income is assessed to determine whether or not they qualify for the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. And of course, that provides them with a lot of medical benefits and a few other benefits as well, subject to potentially which state they're living in. But those limits are roughly about 60,000 for an individual and about 90,000 for a couple. So this change, or this increase, up to 90,000 for individuals and 144,000 for a couple, will have a significant impact, particularly because it means if we're starting to look at somebody who is age 65, and I'm going to use the old transfer balance cap just for the sake of my my capacity to do maths live on air. If someone's got $1.6 million and they're paying the 5% and they get their $80,000 from their account-based pension, when we revert to the full level versus the 50% level, well, that person, they're getting $80,000, but from a deeming point of view, right, that income is going to be deemed at a maximum of 2.25%, right? And so on that $1.6 million, they're easily going to qualify for the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. Now, realistically, we're talking about balances probably in excess of a couple of $1 million where individuals can still qualify for that Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. Now, that's obviously created a little bit of controversy in the not the industry, but in the halls of Parliament, is talking about, well, okay, and in the review of this legislation is, are you just continuing to provide more benefits for those high net wealth individuals? Well, what we've seen is that this has been supported by both sides, so by both Liberal and the Labor Party, the government, and so you would assume that this change to the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card will come in, and then those numbers will start to be indexed from next year. But that has a significant sort of flow-on effect for our clients who previously may not have qualified because they had too much money sitting in their superannuation fund. So what I would now I've just got an issue here where my presentation's just frozen a bit, so I'll just there we go. So let's look at the social security rules and the qualification requirements as far as the age pension are concerned, and then, as I said, after that we'll work through what it means strategically for our clients. So our qualification age from the 1st of July 2021 is 66.5 years. Those born after 1 January 1957, then our qualification for the age pension is 67. And again, for those of us that have been in the industry long enough, we know that there was a point in time where age pension age for females was 60 and for males was 65, and then the female age crept up, and then we got to a point where everybody was at 65, and then we got the announcement that the age pension age was increasing to age 67. Now, of course, you know, I don't want to sort of dwell on the retirement income policies of previous governments and, you know, the concepts around transition to retirement, but if we look at the idea of expanding the capacity to contribute up to age 67, if we look at the condition of release and I guess the anomalies of the condition of release being at 65 versus age pension age being 67, if we look at preservation age being at age 60 or approaching age 60 quite rapidly, you know, there's this whole I guess issue around, you know, what we once knew, you know, is long gone and changes are inevitable in this place. And so, you know, there was an initial conversation around the age pension age increasing to age 70. So I don't think we should ever sort of rest on what we've currently got from a legislative point of view and recognise that, okay, well, that this age 67 may be a moving beast. But for those that are approaching age pension age, it's the time for us now, particularly in scope of all these new contribution opportunities, and that it's a time for us to be able to say, okay, well, if we're going to qualify, are there things we need to look at doing now, such as recontribution strategies or other things? If there are younger spouses involved, do we need to look at lowering a member's balance and upping their younger members' balance, in the sense that they may still be over 60 and be able to access money via a tris or something? So, you know, how do we approach all of these different angles when we're looking at self-managed super funds and social security as a combined event for our clients? So there's a lot for us to proceed, so a process. So if we go back and we say, okay, well, someone at 66.5 years of age now qualifies for the pension. As of the 20th of September this year, the single rate for age pension increased from about $983 odd to $1,026. So roughly just shy of $27,000 a year for a couple, $773 per fortnight, $20,000, or as a combined couple, they're going to get their $40,000. So just a question there from Monica: should members who can start account-based pensions confirm with their advisor before commencing account-based pensions due to the proposed increasing income limits for the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card in case they are under the new proposed income limits? Well, I think it's a good question as to, I mean, I think when we're looking at commencing a pension anyhow, you know, we should always be addressing the issue of social security from our account balance point of view to see where we actually fit. Because the other thing there at the moment, Monica, is obviously that the minimum pension for someone that is qualified or qualifies under age pension, so 66.5, the minimum pension is currently 2.5%, right? So we know that the deeming rate for social security is 2.25%, so that the current deeming rate is below the minimum pension rate. So I would hope that we're actually already looking at that, given that that only applies for the assets above the 50-odd thousand that I'll get to shortly. So on the assumption, and it's a pretty broad assumption here, but on the assumption that the self-managed super fund is the significant asset outside of a few other possessions, say the motor vehicle and the home contents, if we assume that the super fund is the primary asset, then when we're looking at setting up an account-based pension now in a 50% reduced minimum environment, I think we most certainly should always be looking at that whole deeming concept anyhow, to see where our balances sit, particularly for those clients that are in and around the transfer balance cap. Clearly, for those clients that are significantly below the transfer balance cap, I would think that we should be automatically thinking about the social security opportunities that apply in those sets of circumstances. So, yeah, I think it's a good question, but I think most certainly that we need to be educating clients to have that conversation with us about what the social security ramifications are, because obviously the social security ramifications from a self-managed super fund point of view ultimately administratively put additional reporting obligations, because once you report, once you go and apply for social security benefits, then you're needing to get and provide regular updates, annual updates to Centrelink, to Services Australia. You'll get your notification, and that process in itself can often be misdefined because somebody fills a form in incorrectly. And if you fill the form in incorrectly, you might get 6 monthly review letters from Services Australia versus an annual review letter wanting to know what your account balance is. Why do they want to know your account balance? They want to know your account balance to be able to do the deeming calculations from an income point of view. So, I think that there's a good education piece there with our clients, because we need them to understand that getting access to the age pension or the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card is going to provide them with additional benefits, but it is also going to provide them with additional reporting obligations. So, some of those clients that might have unique assets or non-standard assets that they often drag their feet from a valuation point of view, we need to prompt them to get that information earlier, because the information request might come out and the information is needed to be provided by the 31st of December or whatever the date might be from a social security point of view. So all of these things, I think, tie in quite nicely. So when we look at the asset test, we know that our residence is not counted. Our contents, including our cars, the values are counted, our investment properties are counted. And then we've got this additional list of investments. And I come down to the bottom one there being our superannuation savings. And if our super is held by a person over the age pension age, then the benefits are counted, or the assets are counted from an asset test point of view. Now, of course, further to all of that, and this is another, I guess, piece to the broader puzzle, is our legacy pensions, because we have legacy pensions in place, and albeit very few of them now, but we have these legacy pensions in place that provided either 100% or 50% asset test exemption. Now, any activity we undertake associated with those pensions can often have an upflow effect on the impact on age pension for our clients. So if, for example, we've got a liquidity issue or a solvency issue associated with a term or a lifetime pension, most likely to be a lifetime now, then we may have to commute that. And if we have to commute it, then we're going to lose our asset test exemption. Otherwise, we need to go and find another life office to be able to commute and roll that pension into. So all these sorts of things can become relevant. But the asset test exemption was obviously a thing of well over a decade ago now, in the sense of change, and the rule change came about in 2007 there. But it's important to be aware of it, because it can impact on our clients with regards to activities such as simple statements like, I want to change my pension from non-reversionary to reversionary, or from reversionary to non-reversionary, or I want to commute and change the terms of my market-linked pension. Well, okay, that might be possible, but what are the long-term impacts of it? And as I said, I'm going to talk about the grandfathering of the 2015 pensions soon. But again, that's one of those key moments where, if we are discussing reversionary versus non-reversionary, and we're discussing stopping and starting and adding contributions, then all of that can impact on those 2015 pensions. Now, yes, we're getting further away from 2015, and so there's going to be less and less people impacted. But the other side of things is that, up until this point, and this point being right now, we had the interest rate rise yesterday. We've seen a freezing of the deeming, right, for the next 2 years, but it's inevitable that our deeming rates are going to start to go back up. So then, in a conversation we have about grandfathering, and yes, I'm jumping ahead a little bit there, but the conversation we have about grandfathering, we have to have some sort of Nostradamus capacity to predict what's going to happen in the future to determine whether it's worthwhile. Ultimately, we can never factor in everything because we just don't know what the markets are going to continue to do. So that's our asset test requirement. We've then got our asset test limit. So someone that's single with $280,000 is entitled to a full age pension, and then the pension will cut off once their assets are increased to above 622,250. So these are our rates. You've got your single homeowners, your single non-homeowners, then your couples combined, and then your couples that are separated due to ill health. So as an example, if you've got somebody with a savings account of $10,000 and a term deposit of $50,000, they've got an account-based pension which they purchased last year for $175,000. So this is more of your traditional, I guess, Centrelink style client, or your traditional age pension client that had the lower pool of assets. They've got a car, they've got household contents, their total assets are $260,000. Then under the single homeowner test of $280,000, they would be eligible for the full age pension. Now, the way that Services Australia work is that they measure you against both the asset test and the income test, and whichever one gives you the worst result is inevitably which one would play out there. So you want to obviously do both tests, because if you're looking at this alone and saying, okay, well, we're fine from an assets test point of view, you need to measure it off against the income test. I guess from my experience, and others might have seen other things, more often than not, it is the asset test, particularly with the lower deeming rates at the moment. It is the asset tests that are going to create more of an issue for people. But prior to such things as grandfathering, so under the old pension rules of 2015, if people took more than their minimum, then their income would potentially be inevitably higher, albeit they had a deductible amount. So the more they took, the more likelihood there was that they were going to take lump sums to offset that whole pension versus lump sum environment. And again, that's a segue to a whole different conversation piece that we have with our clients naturally now about pensions versus lump sum withdrawals, and that conversation is largely around transfer balance cap space and the capacity to put future contributions in there versus a tax conversation. But in the scope of Services Australia, it's actually a very relevant question for, say, your pre-2015 clients, because those commutations are going to impact their deductible amount, so their return of capital, which is then going to impact their income test results from a social security point of view. So all these sorts of things need to be factored into the broader conversation. So we then have our income test, and you've got deemed income from financial investments, real estate income, deemed income from super funds where they've reached their age pension age, income from sole trader or partnership business, income from farms, distributions, dividends from a private trust or private company. So I've given links to a couple of these slides where you can actually go off and read up more about some of these issues from a Services Australia point of view. But these are roughly our income things that we need to be mindful of. And, I'm going to drill down primarily for us into that one, the deemed income from superannuation funds, to highlight the issues associated with pensions inside a super fund. So our income limits, we've got for a single, it's $190 per fortnight, or just under $5,000 a year. For a couple, combined $336 per fortnight, or just above $8,500 per year, right up to, from a cutoff point of view, $2,243 for a single versus $343,120 per fortnight for a couple. So this obviously gives us a fairly significant scope. And I mean, if we're talking about somebody who is earning $58,000 per year, that's fairly significant income to be generating in retirement or post-retirement age, before you lose access to the age pension. And often it's not actually the full pension that people are after, it's the associated benefits with the age pension that people are enjoying. So the free transport, and I know, again, different states have different rules around their transport and peak hours and different times of transportation, cheaper movies, all sorts of other things that come about by being in receipt of the age pension. So, again, and it comes back to Monica's question there, that we certainly should be looking at how much income they're drawing down, particularly under the deeming approach there, because I mean, if somebody's got from an income point of view, and this one is obviously for age pension, so we're going to be talking about people with, if we go back to the assets test here, if we've got people with less than $600,000 in their self-managed superannuation fund, then from all elements of deeming point of view, they're going to be earning less than that $58,000, right? So therefore, those clients that have an average in the sense of ATO statistics, self-managed super funds, are inevitably going to qualify. So it just comes down to what other assets they might have on the outside. So all of these things, form part of the much bigger picture as to what we need to talk about with our clients in regards to Services Australia. And then the deeming test, which I've alluded to a number of times already, and that is that from our financial assets point of view, so not just our superannuation fund, from our bank accounts and other financial assets, the first 56,500 or 50 going to be deemed at 0.25%. Anything above that for a single is going to be deemed at 2.25%. Now, this amount, or these amounts, have been frozen until 1 July 2024. So one of the things that the new government acted on recently was, in light of increasing interest rates, they were quick to freeze the indexation or the deeming rate from an income test point of view. So, that's a little bit of relief over 2 years. Now, I am by no means an economist in this sense, but when I listen to various economists talk about interest rates, and I listen to the fact that we're going up, but then once we get up to a point, we're going to see coming down again, what will that mean from our deeming point of view from Services Australia? Will it mean that maybe interest rates do peak later this year, and then they start to decline again sort of late next year? And if so, then by 1 July 2024, when we remove this freeze on our deeming rates, where will the interest rates sit? Where will the interest rates sit, and what will that actually mean with regards to our clients moving forward? Wayne, a question there: are the income test thresholds the same for Commonwealth Seniors Health Card, except for slightly different? So we'll get to the rates for the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card in a moment. Different to the age pension test income test requirements. So that deeming rate, it can become fairly relevant in regards to where we sit from a client point of view. So another question there: will both pension payments and lump sums paid out of the self-managed super fund be counted as income under the income test, or only pension payments to be counted? So this is also a really good question, because it depends is the answer to that, and it depends on this concept of grandfathering that I've been talking about a little bit through the presentation so far, and that is that if you have a pre-2015 pension, then your income test is based on exactly what you draw down. And so that documentation that I highlighted before, where each year you'd get a request from Centrelink back then, but Services Australia, saying, please indicate what your account balance is. You used to also have to say, and so if you've got a grandfathered pension, you have to say what your income requirement's going to be. So you had to know what you were planning on drawing down. So lump sums are not counted towards the income test. Certain lump sums to do with employment and other things might be, but superannuation lump sum withdrawals are not counted towards the income test. Now, the flow on from that is that often people will take money out of their superannuation fund and they'll purchase an asset, or they'll do something else with that money. And so you've got to understand that it's the outcome of what comes from that lump sum that will determine whether it's counted as potentially as an asset test or potentially as a gift. So if you take that money and you gift it to say adult children or something else, then you've got the gifting requirements to come into consideration as well. So you need to be mindful that if you're taking lump sums, you're taking it to spend it, but it doesn't count towards the income test. And under the deeming provisions, what you draw also doesn't count. So if I go back and I jump back to the client with, and let me for simplicity's sake talk about the client with $500,000, just to keep my maths nice and simple. Someone's got $500,000 and their minimum pension is going to be $25,000, excluding any discounts. So their 5% pension on $500,000 is going to be $25,000, if my maths is correct. Well, that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant from a Services Australia point of view for any pension commenced after 1 January 2016, because that income, that 500,000, will be deemed at 2.25%. So the first 56,000 will be deemed at 0.25, and then the amount above that, so let's say roughly 450,000, would be deemed at the 2.25%. So ultimately, you're going to have a lower drawdown. So the more you take out of super, the less it impacts your deeming. And not that that's to highlight anything more than to say it doesn't matter what you draw, it won't count. It's only going to be deemed if it's a post 1 January 2016 pension, or you've taken some form of action on a previously grandfathered pension, and that results in you losing that grandfathered provision. So again, if you look at an income test example, and we use the same example as before, then we've got the same level of assets. The deeming up to the 56.5 is $141 at 0.25%. Above that is 2.25%, which gives us an income of 4,465, gives us total deemed income of 4,606, which is a fortnightly amount of 177. Our single rate is 190. So what that gives us is basically a big tick on the asset test for this client, a big tick on the income test, and this client would be eligible for the full age pension. So again, if that income, if our account-based pension balance jumped up by 50,000 or something, then that would push that income most likely, although my maths is, as I said, a bit raw in some of these equations. If we had that go up, if our term deposits went up because, we put our money in one of these interest-bearing accounts and interest rates have gone up, so our balances has increased, then obviously we're going to see those income levels jump up. And that's a really interesting point as well, is that we are starting to see a lot more term deposits offering higher interest rates as a result of interest rates increasing from a mortgage point of view. And so what that means is that interest that we're actually earning from those term deposits is not the income that's going to be counted, it's the deemed income. So if we've got a term deposit sitting at 3%, and again, I talked about my mum before. My mum was telling me last night that one of her accounts is now getting 3.6% from the 1st of November. Well, if that's getting 3.6%, and Centrelink are only going to be deeming it at 2.25%, then that's a positive outcome from her point of view for Services Australia, as she'll be generating more income than will be counted for her age pension purposes. And these are all the sorts of things that we need to be able to be explaining to our clients or our parents in this instance, what the ramifications are of investing in super or investing in other financial assets. So all of these things sort of tie in together to determine whether or not we qualify for the age pension. And if we don't qualify, then that's where we get our Services Australia, our Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. So again, you have to be at age pension age. You've got to satisfy the residency rules, and I haven't put the link here for the residency rules. What I'll do is I'll put that link in the slides. When we send the slides out to you, I'll put in the link from the residency requirements, because it's quite detailed there. But basically, you need to be a resident of Australia to qualify for that. Oops, sorry, just I know that we've had another question here. And then you've got to be subject to an income test. So just before I go through that, this question from Kate: someone over 65 grandfathered could be worse off. In my example, minimum pension of 175 equals 8,750, so more than deemed amount. Better off not being grandfathered. Well, again, it's gonna probably come down to, in that situation, Kate, what their purchase price of their pension was, because the purchase price of that original pension then gets returned to them as a deductible amount. So it gets returned as effectively a Centrelink deduction to determine what their assessable income is. So if somebody started, and again, I'm going to keep this really simple for my own capacity to highlight the example, but if that person started with $200,000 and they started at an age and their life expectancy at that age was 20, then they would have an annual deductible amount from a social security point of view under that grandfathering provision of $10,000. So if their income, if their minimum pension was 8,750, then that deductible amount of $10,000 would wipe out the entirety of that income. So in that instance, the grandfathering is still going to be better. And I think you'll find that in a lot of situations, because the deeming rates are so low, it's going to come down to how many or what the purchase price was of the original pension, given that a lot of these pensions pre-2015 would have had a much higher purchase price back then. And so therefore their return on capital, their deductible amount from a social security point of view is going to be quite significant. And therefore, if they are taking less income now, then that deductible amount is going to be offsetting the majority, if not all, of that income. So that's why there was such a positive inference to retain grandfathering when it came in, because the deductible amount in most instances wrote things off. But of course, as investment returns sort of skyrocket or go higher and our account balances go higher, and therefore our minimum pensions increase, and that deductible amount, if that is a fixed amount, then all of a sudden it may get to a point where the deeming is a better outcome than the deductible amount, particularly if the client has taken significant amounts of lump sums and reduced their return of capital calculation from a social security point of view. So yeah, all of these sorts of things have to be factored into the decision piece from our client's point of view. So our adjusted taxable income, so we don't qualify from an age pension age point of view. We don't qualify because our assets are too high. But what we then do is we take our income, and again, it's our adjusted taxable income, and we deem it from our account-based pension. And if our income is less than 61,284 for a single or 98,054 for a couple, then we would qualify for the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. So again, that's one of these sorts of real benefits of those clients that had higher balances. You know, if they've been entitled to or they're not entitled to the age pension, they still can get some benefit from the government. And so as we see there, if we're jumping from 61,000 up to 90,000, and if we're jumping from 98 up to 144, then we're making a pretty significant jump as far as our assets are concerned, if we're then applying the same deeming rates to determine what the income is from a qualification point of view. So those sort of asset-rich in superannuation sense clients will probably find themselves in a position where, under the new rules, you know, they'll be able to qualify for the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. So, you know, we probably need to wait a little bit longer to see when and how that comes in, but I certainly see it as being a significant factor moving forward. And so, if we take all of that information from a qualifying point of view, I then need to talk about, or want to talk about, what it actually means from a strategic point of view, because again, some of you will have clients that do have pre-2015 account-based pensions, and some of those clients will have maintained them from a grandfathering point of view with Social Security. It might not be a conversation that's had a lot, but other conversations that come into play would be conversations around, well, my pension isn't reversionary, I want to make it reversionary, for example. Can you go about and do that? And so you'll look at the terms of the pension, and the terms of the pension will suggest that you can nominate a reversionary pension now, so you can alter the terms of the contract. But by doing that, you're changing the original terms of this particular pension, and it would no longer be eligible for the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. Now, in the sense of the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card, what we saw is that you basically had to have qualified before 2015, so 31st of December 2015. You have to have been in receipt of the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card at that point in time and still be in receipt and not change the terms of your pension. So, two very common strategies we've seen in particularly the SMSF space over the last 10 to 15 years is that I wouldn't say toing and froing between reversionary and non-reversionary pension, but the idea of changing the terms of the pension to suit the estate planning process. Doing that would have an impact on any grandfathering pension that you might have in place. And the other one is that the whole contribution reset pension strategy, where somebody has a capacity to make a contribution, and so they take that contribution, stop their existing pension, and they start up a new pension. By doing that, then they move themselves into the new environment, and they lose their deeming. So the grandfathering, not deeming, the grandfathering with the old deductible amount process is only applicable if you've stayed on that Commonwealth Seniors Health Card the entire way through. So even if it is a genuine reversionary pension, and I don't like to use the words genuine reversionary pension, but I guess it's probably the most appropriate, and that is that the original terms of the pension were set up as reversionary, and the original notification to Social Security or Centrelink at that time, you indicated that the pension was reversionary, and you based the life expectancy on the longer of the two life expectancies. So everything that you initially engaged with back pre-2015, in that instance, would be impacted by making decisions there. So as I said, and coming back to sort of clarify the question that Kate raised there, the annual deductible amount, and we had deductible amounts in a tax sense, which are fairly relevant before 2007, but the annual deductible amount from a Social Security point of view was very simply purchase price of the pension divided by life expectancy, or in the instance of a reversionary pension, longest life expectancy. So if you had spouses and one had a longer life expectancy, then that would be the dividing number that we'd use to determine capital divided by that number gives us a deductible amount, and our income each year is reduced by that amount to determine what would be assessable for the income test, which is why there's a greater reporting obligation on the pre-2015 account-based pensions than there are on the newer pensions with regards to what information you have to provide to Social Security. Every time you take a lump sum out of those pensions, then that impacts that deductible amount, because you effectively go back and you reduce the purchase price. So you have an original purchase price, and then you have a list of commutations that occur, and each commutation that occurs results in a reduction of that capital injection, and therefore it requires a recalculation of the deductible amount. So again, the third part of the strategy piece, one being the reversionary versus non-reversionary, two being the adding new contributions, and three being the do you take pensions or do you take lump sums. By taking a lump sum from a grandfathered pension, it will impact that deductible amount, which as the markets grow and as the members' investments grow, which of course is a fine balancing act when you're also drawing down, but assume that there is some significant growth, then the income, the assessable income, will ultimately be higher in those circumstances. So there will be a tipping point when potentially the deeming will work better than the deductible amount calculation. So now that we're getting changes to the deeming rules, now that we're getting changes Commonwealth Seniors Health Card, it's worthwhile at least reviewing those clients of ours to see whether or not they're in the best situation that they could be, or that it's totally irrelevant. And again, a lot of the lower balance accounts, both the income test and the asset test are going to be irrelevant anyhow, and they're going to qualify for their full age pension either way. So again, the concept of should grandfathered pensions remain is very much an open-ended question, and it's going to be circumstantial as to who it's going to apply to or not. So if I then look at downsizer contributions, as I said, all these sorts of things to me tie in, and the downsizer probably ties in less to the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card side, more so to the age pension. But the whole contribution strategy objective of our clients is where I see downsizer and age pension becoming fairly significant. So as we know, the downsizer has gone from 65 down to 60 from the 1st of July this year. So look, there's nothing to suggest that that's not a positive measure. But what there is to suggest is that will potentially impact clients unwittingly or unknowingly if they historically were only thinking about selling their house after 65, so after they'd retired and potentially after they'd commenced receiving an age pension. Then what we have to say is, okay, well, if you're doing it now, it's almost like a contribute and forget type strategy, in that you'll sell the house and the proceeds will go in, so you'll enhance the capital of your superannuation fund, and that doesn't really become relevant until you hit a point in time that you want to take that money out. And at that point in time, taking it out, you may also qualify for Social Security, and where's that going to sit from an asset test calculation point of view? So ultimately, the downsizer, it's interesting because when we measure the downsizer impact versus the downsizing incentives that the government are also promoting, which is the whole idea of if you downsize and you hold your money outside of super, then in that instance, that money is going to be exempt from the asset test or for up to 2 years, and potentially in certain circumstances up to 3 years. So you can get approval for an extra year. You need to write to Services Australia and get that approval, but there is an additional 12 months available there. So having that exemption plus having the changing to the income test, where you're only deemed up to that lower threshold, 0.25%, which is clearly up until at least 1 July 2024, then you've got to start to ask the question, well, should we be holding the proceeds outside of super for 2 years and getting the benefit of the asset test exemption and the lower deeming rate, or even at 65, right, if we put that downsizer in, then we're going to have an immediate impact. Once we hit 67, we're going to have an immediate impact of counting towards the asset test and deemed based on the normal deeming thresholds. So given that we've got the extension of the work, or let's call it I don't like to say the removal of the work test, but just the changes to the work test that state that anyone up to age 75 can make a contribution to super. And if, by virtue of us talking about clients that would inevitably qualify for the age pension, then they're going to have a lower total superannuation balance than $1.7 million. Then if we make a downsizer contribution, which the only real benefit of downsizer, or the two primary benefits of downsizer, is they're not measured against the total superannuation balance, and you're able to make them after age 75 if you sell your house later. So if at 67 you sell the house, then is it worth contemplating not contributing that money to super, but holding it outside of super from an asset test point of view, not having it counted for 2 years, then having the lower deeming rate, and then theoretically, right, if you don't buy that place in the 2 year period, well, then you'll trigger the asset test. Well, then you can make the contribution then, because you're still under 75 and you've got a total superannuation balance lower than $1.7 million. So to me, I see the downsizer and these changes to the downsizer incentives inside Services Australia as basically opening up our options to say you can put your money in super or you can take your money out of super, and there's benefits to each, but don't rush to throw it into super, other than the fact that you've got a time limit where you have to have that done by, but there can be other benefits associated with it. So I just find it fascinating that all these sort of changes are coming around at the same time. And if we assume that they'll all pass into law at the same time, then what will be heavily promoted is that the downsizer age will be reduced to 55. What won't be heavily promoted so much is the exemption from 12 months to 24 months from the asset test for those clients. So, we'll be focusing on the 55-year-olds, right, or even the 60-year-olds, when if we're looking at the 67-year-olds who are probably more genuinely looking at downsizing their properties, or the 70-year-olds or whatever, then in that instance, are we doing them a disservice by recommending the downsizer versus keeping the money out of super, now that we've got an extension of time to be able to make those contributions? So I just think there's a lot for us to contemplate. And so I guess to tidy that all up and to round that off, those work test changes that have come in and effectively extended our age up to 75, but more importantly, the fact that the age pension triggers from 66 and a half or 67, then to me, I see this great opportunity, particularly given that preservation age is very fast approaching 60. We know that income from age 60 is non-assessable, non-exempt income. We know that we can have a transition to retirement income stream from being paid from our accumulation interest. And we know that if we're over 60, that's non-assessable. So, there's all these sort of factors that say, well, if we do recontribution strategies from one spouse to another spouse, where one spouse is about to trigger Social Security or access the age pension, and the other one is still a few years away, then can we look at rebalancing those members' superannuation balances, which we're probably already starting to look at anyhow from an estate planning point of view? Should we also be looking at that from a Social Security point of view, so that we can put more money or more assets into the non-tested member, reducing the assets of the other member to potentially enhance their age pension opportunities, albeit for a number of years? Because once the other member comes in and both assets are counted together, they may be disqualified from receiving the age pension at that point in time, but at least they'll be able to transition across to potentially the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. So they'll still get a few years worth of benefits coming out of it. So I see that when we're talking about the contributions and the various strategies that are applicable throughout the entirety of dealing in this whole scope of the age pension, is that there's some pre-planning that goes into it. So pre-planning around the levels of assets that each member might have in a two-member fund, when one member is not necessarily significantly older, but they could be significantly older, but they're at least old enough that there's a gap before the second member qualifies for the age pension. Are there strategies that we can be looking at there? And then how do we factor those strategies in if we're also contemplating downsizing at the same point in time and selling property to obviously broaden up the property market, but also move into something smaller as our wants and needs diminish over time? So the concept that we're looking at recontribution strategies alongside of downsizer contributions, alongside of downsizer incentives, suggests to me that this whole area around Service Australia, the age pension, the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card, is really an area that is not, I think, covered enough within the SMSF industry. And I think that there is greater scope, particularly if our thresholds go up from a Commonwealth Seniors Health Card point of view, and there's nothing to suggest that they won't, then really we should be talking about these things with a lot more of our clients. But based on the questions that I've been getting in the session today, it looks like a number of you are already quite engaged in having those conversations with your clients and recognising that there are opportunities available to them. So that brings us to the end of it. We've got one more question that's just come through there. Let me just, see that. How much of this is advice? That's from me. None of that's advice, Charmaine. That's all general factual information. But I guess the advice piece ultimately comes down to the contribution piece and the pension commencement piece. So all those sorts of things, like the capacity to start a pension is clearly an advice piece. The ability to make contributions is also an advice piece. So I think that the qualifications for Social Security, whilst it probably does fit under that element of advice, it also is very factual in what's out there available for people. So people should be able to obtain what is the facts of Social Security, what are the qualifying levels, and that can be presented to them as part of their whole, I think, of their broader retirement planning piece for them to contemplate. And yes, I will be sending out a copy of the presentation to everyone that's attended today. And I just wanted to, I've mentioned this the last couple